If you're going to be a winner, you're going to need a coach.
Sharpening doesn't happen by accident. A blade left untouched will rust, and a man left unchallenged will stagnate. Every man needs friction, resistance, and a whetstone to grind away weakness and reveal his true edge. Welcome to the Whetstone, where we reject comfort, disrupt the status quo, and forge men ready for impact. Hosted by Dredd, Dark Helmet, and me, the Plague. This is where men step out of the drift and into acceleration, because iron sharpens iron, and no man sharpens alone. And we're back.
It was lackluster, but we'll work on it.
We're back. We're working on it. Well, this has been great. So hopefully guys are tuning in and they've got a really good understanding sort of where we're headed. Last episode, Helmet, you really unpacked this idea of the 3 Ps for purpose, which I know we're still working on, like what that's going to look like in a book someday.
Right. And there may be a 4th P in there, we decided.
Maybe a 4th P, right? So we talked about patterns, pain, and people, and maybe programming. So I just love that. And we are starting to get some questions coming in from some of the pod paxers. So I thought maybe we would just ask a question from the packs that are listening to this, and we'll just encourage guys, if you have a question, feel free to send it to me. I'm at theplague@f3nation.com. We'll field those, and we'll, if they're relevant and applicable, we'll bring them up here. But this one is from a guy named Chicken Hawk here in F3 Omaha. He says, I love hearing about Dredd and Dark Helmet's experience with the Whetstone. I'm curious, do those guys also have a shield lock, and how have they differentiated between those two relationships on the Concentrica? So curious, what are your guys' thoughts there?
Well, I don't want to speak for Dredd, but to kind of give a guy, as a little bit of an understanding of the difference, I guess, the way that it's described in the Q source is that you've got the shield lock is a horizontal relationship, right? It's amongst peers. And those guys are really kind of your ride or die, your guys that you go to for accountability, the guys that you go to help you to get support on different things that are going on in your life, right? Advice, yes, sure. Support, maybe more. And I'd love to, because some things that I've actually had a dream, not a dream, but like a vision, a thought, of having Dredd, because he's been in a shield lock for a good long time with a bunch of guys. And some of them I look and I'm like they don't make sense to me. Like there's a couple guys that I'm like, interesting that you would be in a shield lock with that guy, And so I have questions. I've always dreamt of like having him come down and do like a whole kind of workshop around shield locks and what ought to go on and things like that. Because as Dredd says, it is one of the most difficult relationships to maintain, right? You have to be very, very intentional. You can't, like you're not, there's just nothing natural about just showing up in the same, whatever, right? It's a thing you have to work at. But so that's kind of that horizontal relationship, but the Whetstone relationship really is that vertical relationship, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's more of a dispensary of wisdom. It's some place to bounce ideas. It's some place that you're going to a guy that is further down the road to help understand either A, how to avoid pitfalls, but maybe even more importantly, how to weather pitfalls, because that guy's already been through them. Mm-hmm. He's already been through his set. They may not be the exact same ones, but he's been through his set and he has some ideas of how to get through some of that stuff. And so you go to him and kind of get guidance and advice like that, right? So they're not even close to the same thing. And so there's a differentiation to be made, like which direction those relationships are going. Does that make sense?
I think so. I think my experience has been like guys in my shield lock also are giving me some advice or guidance because maybe they've been through
certainly
similar things, but maybe they're just not. I haven't intentionally sought them out because they're further along, right? I'm more in I'm in a shield lock with other guys that are changing diapers, not guys that have teenagers, and so maybe that's
what I would say. But Dredd, what would you add to what we said there?
So the idea of the shield lock is to provide a man with horizontal accountability, two-way accountability. You both are held accountable and you hold accountable on a peer basis. And you should believe in the same things, generally have the same set of beliefs. You should be in the same place in life. If your kids are in diapers, then the other guy's kids should be in diapers. If you're not married yet, then guys shouldn't be married, maybe young marrieds with no kids. And you should be accelerating at the same general pace. So if you picture, the pre-fire, the pre-gunpowder era of battle, and this is ancient Greeks like hoplites all the way up to, I suppose, just out of medieval times, where you start having a gunpowder or past medieval. The way everybody fought was you got on the battlefield and you massed with as many men as you could possibly put there. In one arm, the men would hold a shield, and the other arm, they would hold a sword. And they would lock those shields together, and they would push forward, and they would clash into the other side who was doing the same thing. And then they would dig underneath that shield and try to stab at their legs and all that, and overcome the other side and breach through a weak point. So you're literally lock them together, right? Vikings fought that way. The Romans fought that way. The Greeks fought that way. And you were completely dependent on the man to your left and your right. There's no heroes out there, because if the guy to your left falls, you're going down too. Now you have an exposed flank. So you have to protect his flank. Now today, the way we fight, if we put men into defensive positions, you hear the term foxhole. That's not actually how we fight. We fight from fighting positions. And in those fighting positions, there's always two men. And they don't shoot straight ahead. They shoot like that. So they're actually covering the zone in front of the next fighting position. So you're not covering what's right in front of you. You're covering the next hole. Your partner's covering, your battle buddy's covering that hole to the other side. That's called interlocking fire. So you have aiming stakes in your fighting position that restrict the amount of movement that you have. So you have to have a vector, a zone of fire that is not where you're vulnerable. You're completely dependent upon the guy next to you, actually the hole next to you, to cover the fire in front of you. So instead of interlocking shields today, we interlock fire. Same idea. If the hole next to you, the fighting position next to you fails, well, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. So if you leave your fighting position, you lose heart, and you run and abandon your position, you're actually screwing the guy next door, because he's covering you. And so that's the idea, in a way, is that you're covering each other, providing fire, defensive fire for each other, and keeping each other strong for your mutual benefit. That's why you have to believe in the same things, generally. You have to be in the same general place in life, and you have to be accelerating at the same general pace. So let's take exceptions to that. Can let's call a strong Christian, a spiritual Christian, can he be in a shield lock with a non-believer? I'm going to say it's not going to be effective, because they don't believe in the same things. It's going to be impossible for them to be on the same ground when they talk about what's fundamentally important. Can you be a guy whose kids are in college like mine, being a shield lock with a guy who's got little babies? Tough. Because my shield lock, when we meet, it would not be a legitimate excuse to say, well, I had to stay home because I had to take care of my kid. We're past that. All our kids are either out of the house or just about to be out of the house. So, we're together facing the same problems. So my shield lock is dealing quite a bit with issues of either actual empty nesting or imminent empty nesting. So I'm a little ahead of those guys. I'm older, but I had kids late, so we're kind of in the same place. But I think two of us are pretty much empty nesters. So we're in the same. So we're talking to those guys about what that's like. How does that impact your marriage? What do you have to do to keep accelerating your end when there's no kids there? And it's very helpful to do that. The guy with the new baby, he's not going to help us because we already lived through that. Okay. We might be able to help him. Right. So that's how it's different. You're talking about four guys who basically are on the same battlefield, fighting the same battle with the same shield of equal or close strength.
Okay.
Now, Whetstone, vertical relationship. You do not have to have the same belief system at all, and don't, oftentimes. In fact, if you're a Christian, I would think as the older guy, you're actually helping the younger guy strengthen his faith. Should be. Hopefully, or the guy might not have any faith at all. And that you could still have a strong whetstone relationship that way. You do not have to be in the same place in life. In fact, I think it's helpful that you're not. Right?
Shouldn't be. Yeah.
Shouldn't be.
I think because
Shouldn't.
I've tried. Right.
Right.
There was a guy who was like,
Right.
"Hey, will you be my whetstone?" And we were, he's only maybe a year or two younger. He did have younger kids than mine, but it just didn't work. It didn't work.
Now, Dark, you and I, our kids are kind of close. You've got 2 in college. I've got 3 in college. But I'm 12 years older than you or something like that. So, there's things that I've gone through in life that you have not yet gone through. So we are not in the same place in life. And I think that's actually good for a whetstone relationship. Now, the third thing, acceleration at the same pace. If you are not that way in your shield lock, let's say you've got a guy who his marriage is falling apart. For a while, you can be helpful to each other. But at some point, this guy's failed marriage has become something that's going to govern everything about him. And the other 3 guys in the shield lock end up spending the majority of their time trying to help this guy with his. It doesn't really work that way. It doesn't really work. Whereas in the whetstone relationship, I would hope that other than, say, the king, because I would expect the younger guy to be accelerating more quickly, I would hope that they're not accelerating at the same pace because you don't really have to help a guy if he's accelerating. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, so that's how they're radically different in my mind. 2 very different relationships that have crossovers. When I hear a guy say, "Oh, it's a whetstone or shield lock, doesn't really matter," I'm like, I think you might not understand the tenets. You have something different.
I think that also, you start looking at the difference, right? And you said, yeah, well, I get advice from whetstone guy, or maybe you don't have a whetstone, but I get advice from my shield lock, and is that kind of the same thing? And and whatever. And the fact is that yes, you're going to get advice from those guys in your shield lock, of course, right? You're also going to get advice from whetstone. The nature of the advice and the things that you get advice on might be slightly different, but also, I mean, I will say, so I'm in a shield lock right now. It's 2 other guys. I don't know if you were planning on asking this, but I think it's something that we can hit here in a minute. Is I've been through several iterations of shield locks as I've tried to kind of narrow this thing in and figure out, exactly how it works and who's going to be best to go down the road with me. And sometimes my needs change and sometimes their needs change, right? And so we have to kind of work through that. But the advice that I get from, say, the guy sitting next to me in my shield lock, when I say like, man, I am super frustrated with X thing, or whatever it is. And he says, it's a different thing when he says, man, I'm right there with you because I'm in a similar thing, right? So it's almost like the advice or the support comes from the fact that, hey, I know I'm not alone, and I know I've got a guy that I can lean on to just, unload or whatever it might be. And I can ask his opinion or his feelings on some things, but it's a different thing when it is a guy who, here's Dredd. And so some cases like Dredd's owns his own business, right? He has his own practice, his attorney, and he's got a bunch of lawyers on him. I would ask him certain things sometimes when I was running my own business, right? Because he was a little further, down the road with some of those kinds of things. So it depends on what what the nature of the guy is that you're going to. But the advice that I get from him, right, is super different than what I would get from the guy sitting next to me, right? The guy sitting next to me might say, I hear you. I understand where you're coming from. And here's what I'm dealing with too that's similar, right? And Dredd says, well, I hear you. Here's where I'm coming from. And having dealt with this, also having talked to men and also having 12 more years of life, to draw from and experience to draw from. Let me tell you what I've seen. Like, let me tell you what I think, right? So it's a little bit of a carving 43 feet together, and who's the guy that's 43 feet ahead that you can call up to and be like, hey, are there rocks up there? Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's super helpful. And I love the sort of visual of sort of the men in battle, right? With the locking the shields and really just sort of what we take for granted, right? The impact of me leaving my spot, right? And sort of the impact that has on the guy next to me. Yeah. No, I think it's really good.
I wanted to jump on your comment right there, Plagu.
Yeah.
We have to, institute these relationships deliberately in modern America. You don't have to institute a shield lock relationship in, you know, third century Rome, because you could die. These are relationships that are necessary because we face no existential threat, and very few of us ever serve in the military, where it's a natural thing. I mean, you've got to be tight with these guys. Like you just learn it by necessity, because it doesn't exist. That necessity doesn't exist anymore. We have to reinstitute it, because without it, it turns out that those types of relationships weren't just random or they were important aspects of life that also kept you alive. They're still important aspects of life that you could technically live without now, but you would not be living a fulfilling life.
It would be a little bit of you're surviving versus you're thriving, right?
Right.
You can physically live and get by without those relationships. We see
That's
a lot
right.
of guys who do, right? And as you say, that wasn't possible back then because there were physical threats. There were things that would kill you. We don't have things that kill us as much anymore. Obviously we do, but you know what I mean? Like, there's no existential threat on the highway. I don't need a guy to run point, on the in the 3 lanes, and I need 2 bumper cars or something. Like it's not really a thing. Like no one's really, there are dangers, but there's not threats in the same way, right? And so the things that attack us now, I think, are more more emotional. They might be more mental. They might be more spiritual. And so you need guys that I think are locking with you on that, the common aspect.
And I would say too, I mean, it's almost, today, right? Because it's so hard to recognize, right? Like it's easy to see a saber-toothed tiger in front of me, but
Not
today,
anymore, it's not.
well, yeah, like the saber-toothed tiger is, manifests as maybe provocative images on a social media platform, or, have it starting to sort of slip into one too many drinks in the evening hours, or whatever, right? Those are harder threats, but they could still result in death, or, like you said, Dredd, a really unfulfilled life. So I really love that idea. I would be curious, we spent a lot of time in previous episodes talking about the excuses or the barriers to the Whetstone relationship. And I think I'm getting to know the two of you well enough to know that you might say they're the same, but I'm curious, like, are they the same for Shield Lock? Like, say, it's the same as why I don't go to a workout, or why I want to get fit before I go to a workout type of thing.
I think so. I mean, I think they might use slightly different words, but it's the same underlying problem, I think. Yeah.
So how do you execute then how do you formalize that shield lock? I've heard a few guys sort of talk about, like, it feels odd, like it's dating. There's one guy locally whose M used to sort of refer to his shield lock brothers as his sister wives, which was kind of an interesting concept. But curious, like, how do you, is it just, I mean, same way, right? Let's grab a cup of coffee. It seems like the 4 of us are on the same page.
Are you asking Plagu, how do you build it?
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't start with 4. That's number 1. Don't be like, I now have officially identified the 3 men who will join me in the show, and we will start today. Right?
Okay.
You pick one guy. So you get one guy and you tell him, I want to form a shield lock. And you say, let's sit down and talk about it. What it would look like, when we would meet, the logistics of it. And then you meet for a period of time, and then you agree to get a third guy rather. You agree who that is, and you approach that third guy, you bring him in, and then after a while you go for a fourth guy. If along the way, if one of those guys doesn't work out, you terminate it and try again. And you're determined to form 4 guys. And if a guy is not working out, you have to be quick to do it, because that guy would just bring down the shield lock. Because you have to bring it down. So, the 3 P's of, being proximate, productive, right, and purposeful. No, proximate, periodic, and purposeful. If a guy can't get there, right? He can't get proximate, you know?
Lives too far away, schedule's weird, can't get to you,
Right,
whatever. Yep.
right.
Any number of
And it
things.
doesn't work. Then you say, "Hey, man, no offense, but, you're only getting here 2 out of 4 times, and that's not enough. No, we need more than that." If you got a guy that you start out with, he expresses that he has the same values, but as it turns out, he doesn't. He's not living them out. He doesn't really believe in what he says. You gotta be quick to say, you're pointing it out to him. If he pushes back on that, you gotta say, "Sorry, man, here's what we believe, and you don't believe that. So we're going to go find a guy who believes that." Otherwise, you're just wasting time. And ultimately, you're just going to start blowing it off because
It'll
you're
be a
not getting
coffee
anything
club.
out of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
at best.
Right. Yeah.
At best. So you have to be kind of brutal about it, really. Because remember what you're doing. If you look at it, would you have a guy in your shield wall if you're facing the Huns who was a coward or who wasn't physically strong enough to hold his shield, such that your 2 guys next to him are holding theirs and,
Yeah.
no, because it would get
No.
you killed.
Or he shows up late.
So,
Well, the
right.
Huns are on a schedule.
Well, only if all 4 of you feel that way. If all
Fair.
4 of
Right.
you don't value punctuality, if that's not a value, then that doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Right.
But if 2 of you do and 2 of you don't, you got 2 of
No
you got to
problem.
go someplace else,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I'll tell you, story time, right? What I see a lot, Plague, is a couple things happen. Guys go, they do one of a few things. One, they go, oh, okay, I read Q Source, or I've been going to Q Source group, or whatever, or I heard the podcast with Dark Helmet and Dredd, and what, and like I heard, and so I know Shield Lock is the thing I need to do. So they go ahead and make a little list, and they're like, oh, Shield Lock is my next thing. They're like, okay, go find a guy, and they'll grab anybody. Right. And they'd be like, hey, we're in a shield lock, right? Or whatever. Right. But they treat it like the thing that they're supposed to do because it's the program, and so they're not listening to the real reasoning behind why you would do it and what the purpose of it really is and how it can actually strengthen you to be a better man. Right. They're like, got it. If I'm an F3 guy, got to have a shield lock. Okay. Next, and you're like, not just anyone will do. And so therefore you shouldn't just jump in willy-nilly. And I think you really have to really evaluate, because I'll tell you what happened to me. So here's the story. Early on, we podcasting, I'm like, Shield Lock makes sense, got it. And then I thought to myself, well, who would I like to spend time with that I think is a cool guy that I enjoy, right? And so I chose someone based on that. And then I was like, you got in there and I would listen to him and he would listen to me and we would chit and chat, and it was a little coffee clubbish, and whatever. And then pretty soon I realized, okay, we need to get somebody else in here because this isn't going where I thought. And so what I thought I would do is I'll add another guy, and that will help change the dynamic and make this thing work better. Well, turns out I chose poorly there as well. Right. And what I was doing was I realized is I was choosing guys who I liked, who I thought were fun to hang out with, but they were too nice. And I don't know, and I'm not saying this to pat myself on the back or anything, but I've been told that I have a little bit of a strong personality sometimes. And these guys just candidly were not up to the task of calling me on my bullcrap. They couldn't do it. They could not look at me and say, hey, you got to pull your head out of your butt. You're doing this all wrong, right? They would look and go, well, I understand why you're frustrated. That'd be frustrating for me too, And that's just not how I'm going to be able to function, because that's a guy who's like, well, if you want to put your shield down, that's fine, and it's not fine. Like, somebody needs to be like, pick that thing up and act like a man, right? That's how I respond. That's, for me, that's going to be the best thing. So I went through one iteration that way. Well, then I was like, oh, I'll grab another. And so I've gone through like 4 different iterations. It was like, drop a guy here, pick up a guy there, drop all of them, pick them. Yeah. Yes, but and one thing, kind of like Dredd said before, is I've heard about guys who, they're in a shield lock and then something happens. Like the guy says, as an example, he mentioned marriage, but I'm thinking of a guy in particular who was like, he finally admitted, hey, I have a problem with alcohol, right? And unfortunately, he could no longer contribute to that shield lock, to those guys' shield lock in the same way, because he had to get his life figured out. He was missing workouts and he was doing all the things, right, that you would look at and go, what's going on? But he finally admitted it. And then it was like, hey, you need different kinds of help right now. You need a different kind of horizontal situation that can help you through this thing. And that's where you need to be, right? And it may be that you need to stay with that kind of group forever, right? Because of the challenges you got with that thing. That's not a challenge that I have, right? It's not bad or good or otherwise. There's no judgment about it. It's just different. It's just not what I have, right? So I can't lock shields with that guy. And so I think sometimes guys think that A, they have to do it because it's a checklist item. That's no good. B, they have to have 4 guys as quickly as possible. I don't think that's true either, right? I think you build that and you got to choose carefully. I think you don't want to go super slow and drag it out forever, right? But you don't want to go so fast that you end up being in a weird spot with a guy. And I also think that what are we on? 3C? I can't remember what I was doing there, but
And
yeah, right. And secondly, and D, but I think that another thing that happens a lot is a guy gets in there and then he's terrified to tell a guy, hey, this ain't working.
right.
Right. And so it either drifts into just this toilet bowl of mediocrity, or it ends up hurting feelings, or it just kind of stagnates, or just kind of dissipates into nothing. And it's like, remember when we used to hang out, like that? And that's, none of those things are effective. Guys keep thinking that it's a thing they have to do because it's a checklist thing that they have to do, rather than going, this is yet another one of the tools that has been presented to us that we look and go, hey, this is really good. I can use this to become the virtuous leader that I'm supposed to become. Right. And they forget that that's what they're trying to do here.
Yeah, it reminds me of the kind of when we were talking about, like, it's one thing to be a dad, it's another thing to be a father, right? And so then, like, how do we sort of teach guys, right? And I don't know, my experience with Shield Locks, I had one group of guys, and during the pandemic, we like to just get together and kind of complain about politics, which it just wasn't. It was sort of like, we all agree, so what are we going to talk about next? And then I had another one that we were just at different stages of life, and it was just hard, right? It was hard to coordinate the regular meetings. And then it was sort of like, yeah, I'm not changing diapers in my household. And so like we're at that same spot. But I'm curious, when you think about like the skills that takes, like, how do we teach guys just to, I don't know, it sounds maybe like candor to me, or I don't know, but like, how do we equip guys to have those conversations, or I don't know.
That's an interesting question, because there's some things I think we do in F3 where it's not so much well, no, it is what we do. We take for granted something that those of us have been doing longer. We take it for granted and we don't provide much instruction about it. So if you read the Q source, it's really more of a set of, I guess, philosophical tenets than it is instruction manual. It doesn't really tell you much about this is how you do it, I don't think. So, this idea of this is how you form a shield lock, that's not in the Q source. To me, it seems obvious that that's how you do it, because I did it, failed, tried again, did it, failed, right? Uh, so, I've kind of taken that for granted. And when I hear a young guy talking, or not a young guy talking about, here's how my shield lock failed, I said, what's going on? Well, yeah, one guy's cheating on his wife, and we just kept, every week we're just trying to convince him to stop cheating on his wife. And I'm like, why do you have a guy in there doesn't have the same belief system or the same values? Well, is that a thing? I'm like, well, of course it's a thing. What the? Well, I didn't
Yeah.
know that. Okay, well, maybe somebody ought to have written that down someplace, or or given a little instruction on that.
We need 2 sources is what we need. We need like the second version.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Because I actually learned how to form a 4-man group in the Charlotte Leadership Forum, which is a 2-year instructional thing that a lot of guys in Charlotte have gone through. And they formed us into what they call Barnabas groups. And it was a 4-man group. They took 4 guys, put you in a group, and you met every week, but you had a leader, a 5th guy, older guy, and he would convene it, and he'd say, kind of walk us through, and when I look back on it, like, okay, then when I got out of Charlotte Leadership Forum, it was about 2 years or 3 years before F3 started. And I said, we need these 4-man groups. And I don't think I really accounted for the fact that I'd had some pretty good instruction on how to do it.
You had a
You
shield
know?
stone is what you had there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. 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 Because, and I look at it as like that first part of that Barnabas group relationship was kind of difficult, because we'd sit there and weren't really wanting to talk and feeling funny about it. It took a little while, and it took kind of the fifth guy, the leader, to say, "Hey, Dave, what's going on between you and your wife with regard to faith formation? If he can get me to open up and be vulnerable and say anything real, then the next guy turns out he wants to talk about that, and he says, I'm having a difficult time getting my wife to go to church with me." And then the third guy goes, "Yeah, what's up with that?" And then we start talking, and the monitor kind of starts pulling back, you know, and that's a typical conversation that my Shield Lock has to this day, where, our kids are older. We're not hustling them to,
Soccer
church day.
practice or yeah.
No, I mean, it's a lot of our wives don't want to go to church anymore. Or a better way to put it, they don't feel the need to anymore. So it's funny when you're a young father, and my wife said, "You're going to church." And I said, "I'll do whatever you tell me to do, but I don't understand why." "You have to, but okay, fine." And I'd go there, sit there, wait till it's over, whatever. And I think it's ironic that over time, when I saw the need for it and how church was making me a better husband and all that, 10 years later, I'm getting up in the morning and saying, "Let's go to church." And my wife's like, "Do we really need to?"
Interesting.
And I thought, gosh, it's so funny. We switched places on that. And I look around in my church, many more singleton guys than women. And a lot of the older guys my age are there without, and we sit together, which I call the involuntary bachelor row.
I've seen that.
Yeah, in batch. We
In
sit
batch.
together.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We sit together. So in my Shield Lock, we talk about that. Why isn't your wife? Well, sometimes she didn't have time to get her hair, right. Or another woman was struggling with something and she's like, "I don't feel like going," whatever. And then suddenly we're talking about how do we encourage our wives to continue their faith development, which is important, right? I mean, Christians are called to do that. Christian man is responsible for his wife's faith development. So we take it seriously. And then so we're helping each other to do it. And then coming back from church and saying to your own wife, "Well, so-and-so's wife was there." Or you don't say it like that. "Hey, how was church?" "Oh, so-and-so was there."
Right.
She's like, "Oh," right. I mean, well, that helps them.
Yeah.
That helps them. That taking this all around, it maybe in the formation of Shield Locks, it would be helpful to have 4 guys in a region who said they wanted to do it, have for a time a guy who's been in a Shield Lock for 5 years and can be the leader of it for a couple of months.
Yeah.
Maybe not a leader, facilitator, monitor.
Yeah, facilitator. Yeah, I think facilitator is good. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And then it comes to a point where it's like, "Look, you guys have this together. You don't need me anymore." I think that'd be a good idea, Dark. I'm just throwing that out
I
there.
like that. That feels like it ought to go in the stuff worth trying.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
right?
the Nantan. You decide whether or not that's a legit.
I know people.
I know around here, I've definitely encouraged other guys, in Metro to do it. And they'll say, "How do you do it?" And I'll say, "Well, number one, you got to have a guy who takes notes. For instance, I'm that guy in our Shield Lock. To be able to say, keep up with everything that has been said. Kind of I don't call them minutes. I just,
No, but pause that just for a second. So, because Plague, I know this is your podcast, but I have questions, but I think they're relevant. Right. So thank you. That's very, very magnanimous of you. Number one, I do like that idea. And I wonder if there's some sort of programmatic thing we can put around that. But before you jump into kind of what happens in your Shield Lock, I wanted to walk back just a teeny bit and say, because I know the guys in your Shield Lock, right?
Yeah.
And they are.
Yeah, who my guys are.
Yeah. And they're as solid as a guy can be. And I work out with those guys, and there's some of the guys. I mean, like I often say, if you're going to war, right, in whatever facet it might be, these are the guys. These are the kind of guys you take, right?
If
and that's what I look for in my own
three other literals, if we were literally shot, I would be with these three
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah. I mean, we're only half joking, right?
Right. No, I'm not
And
joking at
those,
all.
I know,
Yeah.
and those are the kind of guys that I've sought out for myself, and the kind of guys that I want to be around, and in general, and all that. And I think that's what F3 guys ought to be for each other. But how did you land on those guys? And then I would love to hear kind of what practices you guys have evolved and put in place over time in
Okay.
yours, in
So
your Shield Lock.
I blew up my former Shield Lock, much as you did, because it wasn't working, and I started over. And Stinger was one of my blades, and
And
I
so
said,
to let guys know, Stinger's a Metro guy. Stinger and I are about the same age. I mean, he's a couple years older, I think, or somewhere in
yeah,
there, but roughly the
right.
same.
But
So a little bit
our
behind you in age, but
he's 50, 51, I'm
I think it's
61,
51.
but our kids are the same.
Yep.
And he was a blade who had been in CLF after me. That's how he became my blade, actually. So I am a CLF mentor, and he was through that. And he was already doing F3 anyway. He was a blade, and one day I promoted him, and it was in church. So in my church, we have a period at the end of it where we say what's on our heart or whatever. You can do that. So I stood up and I said, I'm going to, much as so this is Numbers 27, 18 and 19, I think. The Lord said to Moses, take Joshua, son of Nun, place your hands on him and raise him up to Elijah the priest and the entire assembly and commission him in their presence. So what this is God telling Moses, you need lieutenants. You need to bring other guys up and take Joshua because he's a leader, right? And I said that in church and I laid hands on him, commissioned him. And he goes, why did you do that? And I said, because I need a shield lock. And we're no longer at the point where I'm helping you, like you have come alongside me and I want you alongside me. And he agreed. So we met, we sat down, we talked about it, and we said, all right, who's going to be the third guy after a while? And we decided on TML, Mighty Lance. And we
Excellent choice.
approached him and he agreed.
So what was it about? But let me ask, what was it about Lance that you said that's a guy I want to approach?
Those, and I don't think we'd formalized it. I think this is even before I actually wrote the Q source or around about the same time. But he, we were going to church together. He's a longtime F3 Metro guy, former Metro Nantan. We knew that we believed the same things. We knew, we were accelerating the same way. Our kids were the same age. So he was perfect for that purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of what I was getting at. I mean, I know TML pretty well. He served with me in the leadership F3 and stuff too. Right. And he's one of those guys that you like. I guess the point I'm trying to make to some degree and what I want to hear is there's an amount of, and for lack of a better term, stalwartism, right? That you go,
Yeah.
that matches mine. I'm dedicated to the things in my life in this way. And that guy is too. Might be slightly different things. Like it's obviously it's different. It's his wife and kids, not my wife, right? Whatever, right? But he's dedicated to those things in that same way. And so that's a guy I know that I can trust and would go to war with. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Yeah. Continue.
Absolutely true.
All right.
So then we met for a while. We talked about different guys and we decided to approach Ice 9. And we did, and he accepted. And we decided as a group that we were going to meet weekly and made that Tuesday mornings. After a while, we said we wanted to institute a workout. So we started running. We thought we could do this at the same time. We started a 10-mile run in Charlotte. So every Tuesday we'd run 10 miles together. The idea was we'd talk during the 10 miles, and all it became was a race.
Yeah. It's like you can't have Ice 9.
Yeah. Anyway, so then we said, well, let's do a strength workout, a gear workout. And then right afterwards, we'll go into our Shield Lock. And so we started doing that maybe 2018-ish.
That's the OG
and
short card, right?
Yeah, that's a short card. That became the short card. So we've been doing that ever since, every Tuesday. And if, like I'm on IR right now, so is Lance, TML. But you come to, So we'll just show up after the short card and we'll do the accountability. So we do our accountability basically 6:15 to 7:30 or so every Tuesday morning, and have maybe, if we do it, if we have at least 2 guys, we almost always have 4 guys. If we have 3, of course we do it. Even if we have 2, we do it. I don't think we've missed a week. I don't think we've missed 2, maybe 3 weeks in the last 7 years, probably.
Wow.
That's really cool. I had sort of, I don't know where I feel like I learned this or heard this, but in my mind, I was thinking the 8 block was sort of the tool that we had out there to sort of say, hey, go through that and then review that with your Shield Lock. And I know there's no
If it
perfect way,
works.
but you mentioned taking notes. Talk us through sort of the.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the 8 block is a thing. And I think C-SPAN introduced that to the world. And I'm not sure exactly where he stole it from or who stole it from, wherever they stole it from to get it to him. Right. But it is a tool. It is a thing you could do if that structures it for you. That helps. But
Sure.
I agree. I'm very curious, Dredd. You said you take notes. We don't take notes in ours. And I never even thought about it.
I'm the only, I take notes, and I think it's good to have a note taker, because in those notes, I record the things that each of us are struggling with and where we are on them. And, who,
And then you tweet them out to the world, right? I mean, that's usually.
hey, exactly.
I
Right.
get it now.
Right. And so, update them every week, as we're talking. That way there's some continuity. And we always do the same pattern. I pray us in, then Stinger talks through where he is. Basically praise and prayer, right? Here's what works, here wasn't, here's why I need prayer. Then Ice 9, then TML on last. And Stinger closes us out. So we do the same thing. And it generally takes hour and a half or so to get through that.
That's awesome.
Some weeks, it's possible to spend an hour and a half on one guy. Once in a while that happens, but not usually. But, there's definitely some weeks where one guy's struggling more than another, or there's something specific. Every once in a while, if there's something very specific, we'll have a special meeting and meet just about that. That doesn't happen very often.
And that might even be outside the normal cadence of
Tuesday
morning.
A Thursday, some other day.
Yeah.
Some other day.
I would, yeah.
And then we do things socially. So like my wife and TML's wife are going out to dinner tonight. We do things socially. And of course, TML and Stinger and I are in church together. Ice 9's in a different church, but so we see each other at church, so we see each other a lot. I would say, if I didn't have that, would there be any other men that I saw outside of work at least once a week? I see them more than that, but would there be? And I think the answer is clearly for me, no. I mean, I see the guys
like workouts in the gloom and passing, or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's right.
But where you would have any kind of real interaction.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why Shield Lock on my mind is in the concentrica, because it's that important. These are the 3 guys who know everything about me, good, bad, and the ugly, know where I'm likely to screw up, watching my blind spots for me, and same thing with them. I don't know what percentage of, say, first, American men have that. Second, F3 men have that. I don't know. You go to every church, will always say it. Small groups, and they're trying to make it happen.
But they're not.
Because it's it's hard.
Yep.
And they'll say it, but it's the follow through on it. It's grasping it as a necessity. That's why we wanted to bake it in the concentrica right behind the shorties.
And that's that, it's obvious, right? There's hundreds of articles out there. New ones come every week or two of, this horrible epidemic, amongst men in our country, and the loneliness and the whatever. And I always get in, and I say that kind of with that tone because I'm annoyed by it all the time, because they love to write about it, but they never want to write a solution about it. Right. They just want to lament that this is happening and this is a horrible thing. And someone ought to do something. So it's, great Oprah and or Otis Bomb articles that they write. But this, I agree with Dredd wholeheartedly, as one might imagine, that it has been, and one iteration of Shield Lock for me was really it. The problem was we just couldn't get proximate all the time. It was just because we don't live near each other. And so it was really difficult. And so it was tough to try and change that one up. But those men are, I mean, it's hard to calculate the value of when I feel myself, and I can feel it and I can smell, I can smell it coming, right? If I'm getting ready to go off the rails about something in my life, whatever it might be, when I can smell that coming, right? And I can send that text to a guy or make a phone call to that guy or whatever and say, and now it's even gotten to the point where it's a lot of inside joke, but there's like different emojis, right? If I send a Cookie Monster emoji to my Shield Lock, not an emoji, what do you call them? A GIF, yeah, right? If I send a Cookie Monster GIF to my Shield Lock, they know I'm about to punish something that I should not and make my queen just fall off the wagon, right? Dredd knows. I mean, he's on that list to some degree, right? I mean, if I sudden Dredd a golf cart tumbling down a hill GIF, right? You know that I'm in the crap, and some stuff's going. It's not good, right? And so we have to work through that. But it's impossible to calculate the value of having those kinds of relationships in your life.
Yeah. Well, and just thinking about our conversation last week on sort of purpose, right? This feels like another one of those relationships that is a vehicle to discovering that. One question I had as I'm hearing you talk about this, and I think is maybe challenging, is so F3 is like an inclusive organization, right? We're open to all men, but then to really have an effective Shield Lock, there is a little bit of exclusivity, right? And so maybe just like balancing that.
Yeah, guys get weird about stuff like that. Let me be real clear about something. An F3 workout. Read those core principles.
Okay.
An F3 workout is always free, but we may charge you to go to something else.
Sure.
An F3 workout is open to all men, but my Shield Lock sure as heck isn't.
Okay. Yeah.
I can't just let any old person in there. It wouldn't work. Not
Right.
because I'm trying to be exclusionary, but
It'd
I'm
be a
trying
different relationship.
Yeah, it just wouldn't. Yeah, exactly. It wouldn't be the same thing, right? It's not
It might be something important, but it's just it's not a Shield Lock.
But it's not a Shield Lock. Yeah.
See, I've seen some, and we have some Shield Locks here locally in F3 Omaha, and hopefully these guys don't get offended because we would quickly lose 15 to 20 listeners. But we have some really large Shield Locks, and I think what I see them doing is they're almost using the Shield Lock concept as a way for accountability to get to a workout, right? And so it's not quite what we've just talked about here. It's really more of a text thread and a where you post in tomorrow. But
that's not a Shield Lock,
yeah.
but that's an effective tool.
Yeah.
And by golly, I'd do it. I mean, I know there's regions around the country, and Dredd, you may or may not even know this just because you don't have to watch all their slacks all the time, right? But like, there's guys where if you don't hit, like the region does, like all the guys in their Slack, like wherever you plan on going in the morning, you better hit the HC button under the announcement of where that workout is and who's queuing that workout. And if you don't, they will be unhappy with you for showing up, and they might even penalize you.
Wow.
Right? Because it's like, well, I was planning my workout based on this. Now, I think that's extreme. That's my personal opinion.
Right.
But it works for them, right? Seems to work for them. I mean, I can say whatever I want about it. These are also regions that have to be growing and have a very healthy, culture that surrounds the core principles of F3. They're living it out a lot different than I would.
Yep.
I mean, good luck. You want me to HC? I don't even, I mean, like, yeah. If you're going to yell at me if I show up to a workout and I didn't hit HC, that's not going to go well for either of us. I'll just go ahead and tell you, but it works for them, right? And so, yeah, there's definitely things to do to be accountable to certain things. But those guys on that text thread, they don't know anything about that guy's. I mean, everything about that guy's life.
Right.
They're not in there in the weeds going, "Hey, man, I know that you and your wife have some communication issues, and I know that you're struggling. I know that we ought to talk about it. Like, you got to tell me what are you doing? How are you trying to, how can we support you? Where do you need to see God in this? How do we make this work for you?" Right? They're not. I'm not on that text thread. They're not. They're just being like, "Whose fat butt's going to show up at the mill tomorrow?" Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, I love it. And I think, this was a good question, Chicken Hawk. So thanks for sending that in. And I think just as we're going
That
through.
was Chicken Hawk? Chicken Hawk
Chi-
came up with that?
Chicken Hawk.
Right? You wouldn't even guess that, but it's that guy. Yeah, it's a good
No, I
question.
wouldn't see that from Hawk. That's okay. That was deep.
I think just the conversation, right, and being able to unpack some of these relationships that are really hard, right, for guys to get into. I know for me, I know an error that I've made is starting with 4 guys right? And I don't know why I just thought, oh yeah, you got to have
Because
4
that's
guys.
the program.
Here are my 3 favorite
nobody
guys.
ever.
Yeah. Well, this is phenomenal, and I think as we continue, we've definitely got a lot of other topics to get through. But would encourage guys, if you have a question, send it in. If it's relevant, we'll read it. If not, tough. You know, we'll just have to work.
As my teenage daughter might say, cry about it.
Cry about it. Cry about
But you
it.
cry about it.
Cry about it.
Well, Plague, you know, it's interesting. But sometimes I wonder what you would think if I sang out of tune. Would you stand up and walk out on me? Lend me your ears. I'll sing you a song, but I will try not to sing out of key. You know what? What do I do when